My name is Joris. What can you expect of today? This is, as Lexi said, a sneak peek of our employee journey mapper. And for me personally, it's an incredibly proud day. This is something I wanted as a HR practitioner for basically my entire career. And it's something that we have been wanting to work on as a company, as PIN, for all that time as well since we launched. For context on PIN, we're an employee experience and communication platform. I used some of the most amazing companies in the world, customers like Carta and OpenAI and SimilarWeb and many, many more. So what can you expect from today's session? In the first place, I would love to provide some context on why we're building an employee journey mapper in the first place. And secondly, we'll show you how this tool makes a what I always thought was very daunting and very difficult process of really starting to build the journey map much, much, much easier. And thirdly, we'll show you how the tool helps you, I would say, operationalize your EX work by assigning owners and priorities and making something that is strategy actually come to life. And lastly, we'll show you our vision on how to make your employee journey map not just impactful for your team, but of course, importantly, also ensures that it has an impact on your employees as well. So if we go to the next slide, just a little bit of housekeeping here. We'll be using our Q&A function a lot. That's where you can ask us questions. So in the bar down below, you'll be able to see the Q&A function. You can upvote questions there as well. And we'll be picking up questions as we go through this sneak peek, this live demo with you. You can also chat with us and other attendees. Just use the chat feature below. If you've used Zoom in the past, you're probably familiar with that. And for those who would like, you can enable captions as well. Just click on more and enable the live transcript below. Without further ado, I'd love to introduce you to the other talking face on Zoom there that you can see, my co-founder, Jon.
Hey there, I'm Jon. I'm the other co-founder at PIN. Unfortunately, I don't have the mustache that I had in this photo. It was a one-time thing for that photo shoot. But yes, my background is I used to be the co-founder of CultureAmp, the employee engagement platform, which is actually how I met Joris. So Joris was a customer of CultureAmp along the way. So I got to know Joris through building out the CultureAmp platform, and he was the HR practitioner that I used to go to get feedback on our platform. So when I was speaking to Joris about his idea for PIN, I was instantly very impressed, and I jumped in as the technical co-founder.
Cool. And I'm one of those practitioners turned founders situations. I used to run HR at companies. And again, that's how I met Jon as well, right? I was working at Atlassian back then running HR when I first used CultureAmp. And then I used it again at Squarespace, and I used it again at Typeform, my other companies where I led HR. So for, it ages me a little bit for decades, I've been running HR before jumping in and founding PIN. And, when I ran HR, there was always so much going on throughout the organization. So if you go to the next slide, Jon, this is just a fraction that you're seeing here on the screen, but there were people entering, transitioning, going on leave, preparing for holidays, needing career conversations, exiting the organization. Right, there's always so much going on inside the organization, and people would constantly come to us for guidance and support. And the very frustrating thing for us running HR, for me and for my team, was that we knew that these moments would be popping up in the journeys of our employees. Yet we were incapable of being there for our people as they experience these really important moments that mattered in their individual journeys. And that's what we wanted to change, right? I wanted to follow a person along their employee journey and be there for people as they experienced moments that really mattered in their career. And that's what employee experience is all about, or EX. You really put yourself in the shoes of an employee when you formulate your HR strategies. And the HR or the term EX has become incredibly popular in the last few years. I think it really surged during the pandemic when everyone started to work remotely, and EX, placing yourself in the shoes of an employee, became increasingly important. And if even the likes like Josh Bersin are talking about it, you know that it has gone beyond just a fringe topic, right? It's pretty common practice right now. As Jon said, employee experience has become a crusade. Every team is working on it. And interestingly, a few months ago, we actually spoke to a lot of heads of employee experience. And of course, they acknowledged the importance of employee experience and that it was a priority. But it was for them as well very hard to articulate what their EX strategy actually is. So if you ask a head of EX, what is your strategy? It's actually really hard to formulate that. And that's where the employee journey comes in. There's another pop-up here from McKinsey and Company. They talk about the new HR operating model that really features EX, employee experience. And they explain that excelling along the employee journey has the most impact there. So the employee journey map is able to provide a framework for our strategy, for our HR strategy, for our EX strategy, in order to ensure that we know what needs to be done to make the EX, the employee experience, top-notch. So that's kind of the context of how we got started, a bit of a personal journey and just a movement in the market as well. And that's where we felt like, well, we should really jump on this. We should really create a journey map. Now, I shared some initial maps on socials throughout the years, but now we got to actually sit down and really create a serious tool. So yeah, without further ado, Jon, if you can take over and maybe show the high level of the journey map.
Sure, I'd love to. So we'll be jumping in and out of what we're building at the moment, just so we can get feedback along the way and also explain some of the core concepts that we're building upon. So just to kind of recap a little bit of what Joris was saying, we see the journey map, the employee journey map, as the framework that you could build out, all those important touch points, moments that matter for the employees. And the way that we've actually, we've listened to people that have been building their own maps and how they've been structuring them. And the core concepts we have are the idea of a category. So something like onboarding is a big umbrella that encompasses lots and lots of different things. But it's broadly a domain or category across a number of different items that you might want to be working on in terms of employee experience. In terms of more detail within that, we have what we call moments. So that's these things here, like offer accepted, first week. And for us, that's a transitional phase for the employee, something that the employee would recognize as an experience that they're having in your organization. It's usually time bound. Sometimes it's actually just a moment that might last for a brief period of time, but usually it's bound over several days or even weeks or months. So that moment is, and some people call them moments that matter, or all sorts of different terminologies used, but that seems to be the thing that people are coalescing on. And then within those moments, we have what we call touch points. And for us, a touch point is any kind of transaction with the employee, either directly or indirectly. So a direct interaction might be literally sending a piece of communication to the employee, a piece of information that's relevant to where they're at, or it could be provisioning something in the system, delivering a benefit, but it's really something that the employee would recognize as a transaction actually occurring for them with the organization. They're the main concepts at the moment. I'm just giving you a very, we'll obviously dive into the detail as we go along, but they're the main concepts just so you understand the rest of what we're talking about. Is there anything else on that, Joris, that you want to
I think, yeah, just to add to that, and these moments they're incredibly important in the journeys of employees, right? But for the, as an HR team, they're just one of the many transactional moments. Like take, for example, a person coming back from parental leave, right? That's a key moment in the journey of an employee, right? Having the touch points, firstly, recognizing that it is an important moment, and I think most people would, right? But then having the touch points in place to help a person through a moment like that. So for example, if a person is coming back from parental leave, there's a touch point that you probably would like to see, and where the manager puts together a return to work plan, or where we provide information to the returning parent on the logistics of coming back into the office, where the lactation room is, all of the stuff that comes with coming back from parental leave. So these moments, and there's literally hundreds of them, right, are really important in the individual journeys and seem like, we really want to be there for people. And if we don't, if people will come to us. And that's the other part that I find really interesting here, is that having a journey map allows us to be much more proactive rather than reactive, right? And because if they come to us, it's already probably a little bit too late, and people can already be annoyed, and their experience is not as great as it could have been. And that's what I mean with my frustration, right? We know these moments, we know that they pop up, but we actually, we're not capable of being there for people as they experience them in a proactive fashion. Yeah, so let's go to the actual building of the journey map. So I've created a bunch in the past, and I've spoken to many people who have as well, obviously, in creating this tool from the ground up. And the interesting thing is that the initial steps are always the hardest, right? It's, and we really, really wanted to facilitate that, to make those initial steps a lot easier to go through. So I had a quick question. If you don't mind, audience, to go browse to menti.com and enter a code and share your answer to this question. What is the hardest part of creating an employee journey map from scratch for you? If you have already built one, that's great. But if you're thinking of building one, what do you think? Or, what's going on in your head at the moment? What is the hardest thing of starting a journey map? So I'll take a minute or less for people to quickly go to menti.com.
John, do you want to toggle over to the results screen? We can probably see some answers coming in. There we are. Remembering everything. Oof, yeah.
Yeah. That's right.
Overwhelmed and where to even start. Yeah, definitely recognize that. Time feels big and overwhelming. The
different demographics.
Yeah, so these are all things that, the demographics part almost felt, thought of later as it came through. But I definitely had the feeling of feeling somewhat overwhelmed. There's a piece on technology as well, that hopefully we can facilitate that to some extent. I'm gonna close this, but I think there's definitely a consistency here.
Yeah,
and that's interesting. Ensuring cohesiveness between departments as well came up later, and definitely something that we'll be covering as well. So just in short, and then we dive in again. So what is the, for me, the number one problem, and that came up in the surveys as well, that your responses as well, like how to get even started. So imagine this, right? You gather your team in a room, maybe virtual or physically there, starting with a whiteboard, lots of sticky notes, right? And starting to add all of your moments. Now, as I said, there's literally hundreds of these moments and touch points to consider. So it's just really hard to get started because of the volume, but also because you need to have all of those moments in your head, right? So what we wanted to do is to give you a baseline to start from, rather than to start from scratch, to make that initial hump of getting started a lot easier. Like, we're intelligent people. We have large teams or smaller teams, but we can work with our teams to get all these moments on a board. Surely, it just takes time, and it feels very like a massive task. The second problem is how to get everyone on the same page, right? In HR, I think traditionally we operate very much in pillars. You know, we have talent acquisition and HR ops and L&D and internal comms, and they all feel very separate from each other. So what EX, employee experience, seeks to change is our perspective and think across the journey, because we follow a person in their individual journeys. So less siloed. But the reality is traditional HR models are still pretty siloed. That's just the way that we are set up as teams. And there's many stakeholders that should be included. So we wanted to make it easier through a tool to get people together and to even do it async, instead of like having everyone in the room and stuff like that. So it's a bit like a Miro board, but with a lot more structure and more employee journey mapping specific functionality as well to facilitate that process. And the third problem, we wanted to allow you to present a high level like map back to the organization and to leadership. So I actually spoke to one HR leader who created their map, and with a lot of detail there, and then they got help from a designer to make it more presentable, because it looked, it didn't look very nice. And I think a lot of people, struggle to go from those sticky notes on a whiteboard to something that is presentable. So we wanted to help you showcase your beautiful and unique maps to be able to communicate those within your organization. So yeah, diving into some of the functionality that Jon will be showing is starting with the map, having all the promo moments preloaded, collaborating with your team, and presenting and exporting maps. So that's what we'll go into first.
Great. Sorry, I jumped the gun a little bit there, Joris. Sorry.
No, it's all right.
So as Joris was saying, I think one piece of feedback we got very early in this process, and we're currently in the late stages of building the alpha. So the good news is you'll be able to log into this pretty soon. We're actually asking that question at the end of the webinar. But one of the pieces of feedback that we got fairly strongly is people definitely wanted a baseline to work off. They didn't want to start with something from scratch, that they wanted a fully populated map that you could see everything and then modify and prioritize. And we'll come to those concepts later, but something that you could actually start with. And so I'll just zoom out. You might have seen Joris has produced a couple of Miro boards and Figmas that were very similar to this, that were just cataloging all these moments across and touch points across an employee's journey. And so what we've done with this tool is look at that, what people were using that for, and say, hey, let's put this together in a much more digestible format, and something that you can both collaborate with others on. So we have the ability to share this with others in your team, and also export. So this is exportable. You could take it out as an image, as a vector image, put it into a presentation, that sort of thing. And so what we've done is take a lot of our content, and we're building new content, and actually put it into this very considerable map that you can then slice to suit your unique needs in your organization. And it covers everything, the traditional things. I mean, Joris can attest to this. A lot of our customers are doing onboarding, new managers, career conversations, those absolutely core experiences. But then we also add all the other things on top. So life events here, these are things that are extremely important, but maybe don't happen frequently enough that you've actually built them out within your organization. All the way through to things like cyclical events, holidays, might be minor things, but in a global remote organization, recognizing holidays and being able to do that between the different parts of your organization is extremely, extremely important. So everything is covered. The other area that we saw as really interesting at the moment is building engagement. So this is actually the phase where, hey, someone's onboarded, maybe they're at year 1, 2, or 3, they're not getting promoted, there's nothing really changing currently for them, but you still want to keep those employees engaged. You still want to build a relationship with those employees. So what can you do? What can you actually do for a year 2 employee? And a lot of it's around building delight, recognizing important events for that employee, thinking about those extra moments that perhaps aren't on your radar already. Joris, I was going to ask, for some of these things, I mean, I think, we've probably built a lot of these things before, but just considering the effort that goes into putting these together and how you thought about putting something together like parental leave and maybe how these are structured internally.
Well, what you see with a lot of teams, they start like with one part of the process and don't do the entire map, and and that works very well, but then they never actually get to do the entire map. And I've been guilty of that a few times. I think I've built out the manager journey, like new manager journey a few times, onboarding, that type of stuff, but it becomes harder. It really does. So and also, the Miro, like a literal whiteboard is only this big, right? And you can see in this map, there's so much more to cover. So you're going to leave things out. I think that some journey maps are overly simplistic as well. So if you go online, you probably can look at some journey map examples that are just like, they cover only like parts, attract, retain, or, motivate kind of categories, like those very high level categories. But in a global remote company, there's a lot more moments to consider that really make up the employee experience. So what we wanted to do is create, for example, consider like holidays and observances, right? Those are important moments. If you're a manager of a team and let's say International Women's Day is coming up, right? And you need to, consider a moment like that is important, right? It may be, the first time you're leading a team, International Women's Day is coming up. What do I do and say at a moment like that? Those are still important, like things to consider. I think, things like performance reviews, salary reviews, like how do you have a difficult salary review conversation? Could be a moment, if salary reviews are coming up, that could be like a touch point for us to consider. So I think what this map does is it's just a lot more thorough, and it's really encompassing everything in employee experience throughout the entire journey of an employee. Now, obviously, you can add moments as well. You can add touch points. You can will ensure that people can add categories and stuff like that. So you can build out your map and make it your own, right? But this is just a baseline to start with.
And Joris, it'd be interesting. I think another observation we have, I'd be interested to get your commentary on this, would be a lot of the existing content out there is very linear. So people join, they onboard, and then they exit. And I think something that we recognized with this was that there's lots of different small journeys. It's not, things don't happen in a predefined sequence. Speaking towards the sort of the kind of the examples you had, none of those were actually something that were necessarily linear. So just thinking about that and how you think about that.
Yeah, so the linear part is like almost like the easiest part. Like, for example, take the onboarding journey is very linear, right? And there's a point in time from, pre-onboarding to day 90. So you can really like work. Yeah, exactly. That's on the screen at the moment, right? So it's a little bit easier to kind of map those out. But then there's all these things that may happen in the journey of an employee. Parental leave may happen, right? And then there is cyclical events that happen every year. So, what we're saying is the employee journey is not a linear thing from start to exit, and we can map those out. Now, things may happen, and things will happen in a recurring fashion as well. And we really wanted to encapsulate all of that part, because otherwise you're doing part of the employee journey, but you don't make it a really thoughtful, thorough process to capture all those moments, those unique moments that really matter in the journey of an employee. So yeah, absolutely, yeah. So if you so you've got your baseline, right? As an organization, now you have to contemplate what you'll actually work on to improve your employee experience, because what's the point? Otherwise it's just a theoretical exercise to put moments that matter on a board. That's not the point of a journey map. The point of a journey map is to make improvements in the overall experience of an employee, and therefore we need to know what we're going to be working on and know who will work on what. So that's that's the kind of starting point. So we had a very quick question again on that, because we genuinely we'd love to know what parts of the journey map people would start working on first. So if you think about the entire journey, right? You saw on the screen, it's very lengthy, right? But what would you be working on first? And I'm curious to see if onboarding is still, it used to be super high priority. So people who work on a journey map probably would start there. But in this climate, onboarding, people are not hiring as many people. I'm just curious to see if that still comes up. So if you wouldn't mind just clicking in what part of the employee journey map you would work on first on the little poll that just popped up, that'd be great.
All right, you're ready for results?
Yes, please.
Yes.
I'm curious.
Drum roll, please. I'll share the results so everyone can take a look. And it seems like onboarding is still really top of mind for folks.
So the onboarding journey is, and I think the reason for that, focus there, is because, first of all, the journey starts there, right? That's where everyone's journey starts. And there's a lot of nuance as well in that process. That's right. There's a lot of communication needs in that process. A lot of work involved. A lot of manual tasks there. So effective onboarding is really important. If you go to the next slide, John, I put down a little stat. So these are where teams, generally speaking, tend to start that we found. So onboarding, it's on the top here as well. That's where people, generally speaking, tend to start. And really importantly, especially now with remote work, I think onboarding has become even more important to do well. So there's a stat from a recent Bamboo HR study that showed that people feel 18 times more committed to the workplace, right? I don't know the exact kind of percentages there or the stats, but it's really, really important, right? And what we know is that people who do not have a good experience are so much more likely to leave the organization again. The second thing that people often focus on is live events, because it's kind of low-hanging fruit, and because HRIS systems actually enable this quite naturally as well. So, it's easy to start with things like anniversaries and birthdays because it's relatively easy, right? And it makes the workplace feel more human, right? It's a nice thing if people remembers, if you're with the company for 5 years, and for your 5-year anniversary, it's a pretty important moment for you. It's not nice if it gets forgotten, right? So people often start there because of simplicity and impact. Then the other one that often pops up is becoming a manager. So new manager, the new manager journey. People feel like managers often feel pretty under-supported. And if you ask your managers in your organization, your mid-level managers, do you have all the tools, and did you feel very confident in your first weeks as a manager? It's likely that they may not be giving you a really positive response, because often training is provided maybe once or twice a year, new manager training, so people don't feel like they get the tools. And only if that new manager has a really good manager themselves who provides mentorship, it's actually a forgotten phase in the journey often. And it has a huge impact, right? Especially, again, with more global remote companies. I think, there's a stat there from Gallup, 75% of voluntary turnover can be influenced by the manager. That's absolutely massive, right? And I think that, managers have become, mid-level managers have become a linchpin as well in communicating company-wide messages as well to their employees. It's really impactful because of that indirect effect that they have on the employees as well.
Yeah, particularly in remote
Yeah.
situations, that manager relationship has been, increasingly more important for that comms.
Yeah, if there's articles as well that that are there on GitLab, and companies that do remote very well, and they all say Dropbox had a really interesting article about it as well. They said never ever before have mid-level managers been so important, and that's after they moved to remote. So it's really, really impactful to do that well, and a lot of companies don't really they let people figure it out themselves. So yeah, these are all things that we wanted to approach with the product, right? We wanted to make sure. So if you go to the next slide, John, it's something that we wanted to look at with, actually, can you go back one slide? Sorry, I've actually forgot about career development as a topic as well. My apologies. So this is not an area that people often want to work on. People want to, people, like, if you think about like personas in the organization, I think there's a appreciation of the person who's been in the organization for a longer period of time. What do you do with people on an ongoing basis, not just in their first year? Like often, we have really great onboarding, and then, we give them a lot of support, and after a year, like, oh, you're on your own. Yeah, hopefully you have a good manager, right? So what do you as an organization do to make the journeys of those people like continue to be great as possible? And there's lots of things that you can consider. Lots of them are in our journey map as well. But career development is one that stands out as, people the one that people navigate to first, making sure that people have career development conversations. And you can see there the stat from Deloitte as well, like strong learning culture has a huge impact on productivity in the organization. Cool. So yeah, going back to the next.
There's a question in the Q&A if you wanted to have a look at that.
I think a lot of, so I'll read it out. I think a lot of places are experiencing like a feeling of being overwhelmed with the number of platforms they have in HR, particularly large organizations. What is the benefit of adding yet another tool? It's a really good question. I think most of the customers that we work with experience the same thing. First of all, like PIN and the employee journey mapper are, they're integrated, but they're two different tools. So the journey mapper is more for you to map out your journey and then potentially do something, and we'll get to that in the last section of the webinar. But potentially utilize that journey map to provide support to folks. PIN as a tool is the tool that allows you to automate communications to people as they experience moments. So that's the core PIN product that we already have, and that are being used by like many customers throughout the world already. Now, people who use, like companies that use PIN, their employees probably don't even know that they're using PIN. So we leverage the communication platforms that companies already have. You in HR would know, right? Because you use the technology to power those automations and those personalizations. The people themselves, they would receive a message from, your HR person via Slack, which is automated. So for example, if a person gets promoted to become a manager, PIN can automatically send a message via Slack from your learning and development person to that new manager. So it's not coming from a bot, right? It actually comes from a real person. It is automated, it's scalable, and it's done through the communication platforms that you're already using, like Slack or email, etc. So the employee doesn't even know that you're using PIN, to avoid just that very issue, so they don't have to log into yet another system. Yeah.
The thing I would add on top of what Joris is saying is that we actually see a role for the journey map, even though it's a new tool, to actually help with this problem. And I think that where people see or get frustrated by the proliferation of tools is two areas: consistency of experience. So all the tools are different. They may not be consistent in terms of what they're delivering to the employee. And then the other one is to where to go for what. So I think people get confused if you've got Confluence and Notion and another wiki, what's used for what particular purpose and how are they used. And I think we see an opportunity with the journey map, and I think it actually echoes some of the themes that Joris is going through on this slide, to actually map out the experience. They think about the experience, where those touch points are, what systems are involved, what people need to do, how to prompt people towards in the right direction. So I don't necessarily think that the number of tools is an issue, more than how do you communicate and give employees a point of reference that they actually know where to go and what to expect at each moment.
Yeah, maybe I'm not sure if it's in our early kind of versions already, but you can, the journey mapper is tools agnostic, right? So you can add in the tools that you're already using. So if you're using like for example, anniversary communication, you're using your HRIS like Bamboo HR already, you can actually enter in saying, hey, this moment is covered and automated through our HRIS already. So you have an overview of, for all of the moments, right, and all the touch points associated with those moments, which systems are delivering that support. Now, sometimes that may mean at this point in time that it's manual, right? Maybe if a manager gets promoted to become a manager, you send them manually an email on what they need to do or know in their first days as a manager, and you may refer them to your wiki, right? Obviously, that's a bit more complicated, clunky process, but that may be the way that you're currently handling that. The Journey Mapper gives you the overview of all the systems involved, and you can actually filter by all the touch points that are, for example, covered by ServiceNow, or all the touch points that are handled by Workday or Bamboo HR or manual, right? So actually, we really want to facilitate. That's a good point, John. So yeah, so this slide is like, how do we, what do we want to do in order to make your lives easier to help, set those priorities and those owners? So firstly, we want to help you decide on which specific parts of the journey you want to work on and zoom in and out of those parts of the journey that you want to work on. So for example, if you want to focus on onboarding first, we'll let you zoom in on that and kind of ignore the rest of the journey map as you're working through onboarding. Because as we explained, the journey map can be quite lengthy, right? So zooming in and out is going to be essential. We also wanted to make sure we wanted to make it easy for you to understand which of the moments are owned by which parts of the organization. So for example, which touch points, which key moments are handled by learning and development, which ones are handled by HR operations, right? And you can even drill down further. You can drill down on a person level, right? So, the touch point of a newly promoted manager is handled by Mary in L&D. So you allowing us to set owners for different touch points and moments is really important to understand, who, not just who handles it, but also who owns the improvements if we want to make improvements in certain moments to improve the overall employee experience. And lastly, you need to know the tools. You need to you need to kind of be able to prioritize the touch points, the moments that you want to make improvements on. So, to move from designing a journey map to actually project managing the improvements, that's important as well. So here is like the features that come with ownership and priorities that we've identified as the most essential ones. And again, this is early. We were talking about an alpha that we're going to be releasing first. More functionality will be added, but this is kind of what you'll be looking at in the beginning. So editing a map, assigning owners, assigning priorities, and filtering to different views. So John, if you can.
Yeah, I'll jump back into the demo. So as Joris mentioned, I think something that we heard pretty clearly was that ownership was actually a pretty important topic. And that was really interesting for us because I think when we initially started designing this, we were prioritizing other things and other facets of designing. So what I've done here is clicked into a particular touch point, congratulating the new hire, really important, moment where someone's accepted an offer, describes what this touch point is all about, and then actually what's inside that touch point, what will actually happen. The other thing you can do here is actually, as Joris mentioned, actually tag it with things that are relevant for your organization around that touch point. Ownership is one. This could be an individual or a team. In this case, it's tagged to people operations. And something I think that we did here in our initial interviews with people was that a lot of these moments exist, but the ownership's a little bit unclear and people are worried about things falling through the gaps. So it's not that, people don't necessarily have all these facets of their journey. It's just that without that clear ownership, who's making sure that it happens and who's actually making sure that's getting improved was the other part to it. So being able to assign clear ownership was a pretty huge thing. The other thing was actually assigning, hey, where are you at with this? So actually being able to assign priorities, build a plan out of this. Do you have this at the moment? Is this something that you actually want to work on, and actually being able to see that clearly within the map? Hey, might also be something that you just don't want at all. And I think that came up earlier in one of the polls of what do you want to exclude? What do you want to deprioritize so that you're focused in on the experiences that are really important? And so there's a bunch of different fields that we've added to this particular thing. We're adding more over time. System is another important one that we'll add, that will say, hey, what system is actually, the prime mover in actually defining this touch point. And then what we've got is in this map, we're able to then filter. So you can come in here and slice and dice the map according to all the things that we discussed earlier. So category is one thing. So maybe you just want to see candidate on onboarding and narrow in on just one particular set of moments within the journey map. But then equally, you can start to think about, hey, I want to filter down to just the things that you want to, work on over the next quarter, ownership, systems involved, that sort of thing. So what you can be able to do here is actually build slices across your journey map that actually give you that perspective across it.
Cool.
Did I miss anything in that, Joris? I know we're pretty short on time, so I'm rushing through a little bit, so apologies.
No, that's totally fine. Let's go to some of the automations and the content pieces. So if you go to slide 24 on the map. So on slide 20 sorry for that.
Slide 24.
Yeah, perfect. Yeah. No, slide 24 is perfect. So basically, I wanted to kind of take a minute or two to dive into the next steps and what our vision is for the future of the journey mapper as well. Per the earlier question, the audience question that came in, it would be great at some point to connect to HR data, so we actually know where people are at within the journey. So how many people do you currently have in the onboarding phase? How many new managers have you got, and et cetera, et cetera. And that also allows us to potentially trigger messages in an automated fashion using our other technology as well. So linking those two together. So for example, if a person moves from 0 to 1 or more direct reports, they've just become a manager, obviously, for us to be able to allow organizations to automatically send communications to that newly promoted manager. So that's kind of combining the two technologies. And then the first point here is that for all of those touch points, you need to know, you have to have the right words in order to communicate with your audience as well. So what we wanted to do is give you access to amazing communication templates for each touch point. So if we can go into that as well and show the content piece in the demo.
So, and Stephanie, you asked a question in the Q&A of how this relates to the existing pin templates. And the short answer is we're collating the open library and the ones in the product, and we're putting them within the touch points. So when you'll be inside a particular part of the journey, again, this is the congratulate new hire example, we'll have all the different templates there as communications, and you'll be able to open that up and even action them directly in the moment. So all that will be fully cataloged within the journey.
Cool. And then if you click out of this piece of content, John,
sure.
So later at some point, you can see here to the right of that action point, you can see the option later to actually enable the automation as well. So you can go straight from within your journey map. You can click automate and say, yes, I want to connect my HRIS data or other systems data to our journey map, allowing me to automatically trigger communication to go out at all of those moments during the journey. It's our vision that across all of those hundreds of moments that a person may experience during their journey, for us to be able to automatically be there for our people at the right time, at the right point, and sending information to the right person.